Hi everyone, welcome. My name is Morgan Zabo and I am a Climate Health Communication and Outreach Coordinator in the Climate Program Office at NOAA. I'm here to welcome you to the 5th webinar in the series presented by the National Integrated Heat Health Information System, NIHIS, Urban Heat Island Community of Practice Series. In the first webinar, we learned about the physical hazard of extreme heat on several spatial scales. The second webinar, Constructing Heat Vulnerability Indices, looked at assessing vulnerability and risk. The third webinar examines cities that have concrete policies in place to ensure heat risk reduction can happen, while the fourth webinar featured communities that have implemented solutions to make their built environment cooler and more resilient to heat. All of these webinars coincided with the first 3 steps of Climate Toolkit's Steps to Resilience. In today's webinar, we will continue to explore step 3 of the toolkit, Investigate Options. This step examines possible solutions to the highest risks and builds a list of options through brainstorming and checking how other communities have responded to similar issues through inclusive community discussions. Through this step, we will be examining the specific theme of green cooling infrastructure. So to discuss this topic, we have 5 fantastic speakers here with us today, starting with Eric Greenfield of the USDA Forest Service. He will give us an introduction on the topic of green cooling services and provide information on what the Forest Service is doing in this field. Then we will move on to 2 case studies. The first case study is examining heat resilience through green infrastructure in the city of Philadelphia. The second case study is examining climate-safe neighborhoods in Pawtucket and Central Falls, Rhode Island. Following the presentations, we will have ample time for a Q&A session moderated by Eric. But before we begin, just a few reminders. All the sessions will be recorded and posted to the NIHIS website and YouTube channel. We encourage you to post questions using the question chat function on GoToWebinar, which you can see in the control panel. So to kick off this webinar, our first presentation will be from our moderator, Eric. Eric Greenfield is the Acting Urban and Community Forest Program Coordinator for Northeastern States with the USDA Forest Service State and Private Forestry Eastern Region. He has served as a forester supporting urban forestry research, where he has worked on ITree, Resource Planning Act reporting, the Environmental Protection Agency's Enviro Atlas, and several research manuscripts. I will now hand it over to Eric to take it away. Off to you, Eric.
Thank you, Morgan. And again, I just want to introduce you to the webinar in the green cooling infrastructure using urban forests and trees. My contact information is at the bottom of this. My contact information is at the bottom of the screen if you'd like to reach out. So just a quick overview of today. I'm going to talk a little bit about urban forests and trees as green infrastructure. We'll take a brief look at trends, opportunities, resources, and tools. And then I'll turn it over to those other wonderful panelists who will give us the practical applications in progress in the field, or where I like to think of it as where the real work gets done with our constituents, stakeholders, and even our local environments. When I think of urban forests and trees as green infrastructure, it goes beyond just that aesthetic that dresses our neighborhoods. Trees and forests have huge environmental benefits, and I like to think of that as from an acronym that Dr. David Nowak gave me quite a few years ago using the TREE acronym. T, meaning temperature reduction and other microclimatic effects. R, removal of air pollutants. E, emissions of volatile organic compounds and tree maintenance emissions. And last, energy effects on buildings. Trees and forests help us with mitigation primarily through 2 functions: the evapotranspiration as water moves through the trees and out through the leaves, and also shade. We can take heat out of our local environment and put it into the atmosphere as water changes from a liquid to a gaseous state. It takes heat with it into the atmosphere, and then the shortwave radiation reduction that comes from shading from the sun. We do have to be aware of scale and geography when we do these kinds of plantings, so I always emphasize right tree, right place, like many of our urban forestry practices. We have to think of seasonal considerations, surrounding geography like upwind features of water or forest, topography of our region with cold air drainage coming from ridges down into the valley. And we have to be a little careful with canyon geometry and closed canopy that can actually have the shortwave radiation come in, bounce around, become long wave radiation, and retain a lot of the heat where the people are. For further information, if you're interested, I learned a lot of that from my now retired colleague, Gordon Heisler, and his information is at the bottom of the slide. Some trends and projections that we found with urbanization over the last few years goes back to my work with Dr. David Nowak. And between 1990 and 2010, we continue to see an increase of urbanization based on census definitions here in the US. Dr. Nowak took that trend line, projected it out to 2060, and as you can see from this image, we expect to see increasing urbanization continue to 2060. Accompanying that trend is also impervious surface cover gain. And through urban and community places throughout the United States, we did find that many states did have statistically significant increases in impervious cover gain over a 5-year period that we studied using photo interpretation. Accompanying that impervious increase was an urban and community tree cover loss, also showing some statistically significant losses in tree canopy, but also a few states that actually pop out adding some trees. And again, if you're interested in that research, the reference is at the bottom of the slide. I'm going to talk a little bit more about ITree in a minute, but one of the neat studies that has been done very recently, and many of you have seen, was led by Paramita Sinha and a lot of our folks in the ITree team and SUNY ESF. And it was fascinating to note that if 10% tree cover was added to the city of Baltimore from the original 16%, we could avoid up to 247 deaths a year. The tools and resources that we've been using, I included some Forest Service and some others that are popular and that I personally have used. But first, I want to make sure that I announce that the Forest Service has issued a climate adaptation actions for urban forest and human health. And you can find that at the PDF link there. I've also used the US Climate Resilience Toolkit, EPA EnviroAtlas, which is a nice GIS-based interpretation of environmental benefits on the ground for quite a few cities in the US. We've all been very intrigued and utilizing the tree equity scores coming from American Forests. A lot of our Forest Service resources, including urban heat mitigation and other urban forestry information, is available at vibrantcitieslab.com. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about one of the projects that we worked on in our office for over the last 20 years, and that's ITree at itreetools.org. ITree is simply a series of free tools that are scientifically vetted that quantify ecosystem services and values for trees and urban forests. It's designed to help us with forest management, and it is a very collaborative exercise, primarily between the Forest Service and Davey Tree, and supported by the other organizations that you see on the right. We now have international coverage, and some of the largest growth in ITree has been international. The simple idea behind ITree is to help you do your management decisions. You can put local data and conditions into the database and then make recommendations for species, locations, and planting rates to get to the desired cover that you want. Among the calculated services of ITree are air quality improvement, water flow and water quality improvement, greenhouse gas reduction, building energy use conservation and altered emissions, oxygen production, health benefits, UV radiation reduction, and we've added up to 9 bird habitats right now for wildlife. The future will include that modeling that you saw in that previous study. We hope to have cooler air temperatures with ITree Cool Air in the future, pollen, and we're also looking at biomass components for utilizing urban tree waste. The core tool of ITree is really ITree Eco, and that's an inventory or survey-based or sample-based design of your local conditions to see where you are before you can decide to move forward. But today I'll only talk quickly about ITree Landscape, ITree MyTree, and ITree Design. ITree Landscape is available at landscape.itreetools.org, and it too is a GIS formatted program that can help you evaluate where you are in current data needs. We have tons of census data, tons of environmental benefit data, and it can even help you address environmental justice issues. We'll have a manuscript coming up soon on the Homeowner Loan Corporation red lines, and what difference that has made in impervious and tree canopy. But Landscape for those selected cities actually has the red line data embedded. One of my favorites to recommend to everybody is MyTree. MyTree provides you a nutrition label after you take some basic measurements of any tree in your yard, in your neighborhood, or even around your business, and provides you with an idea of what the benefit is of that tree. You also have the opportunity to map that tree if you wish in a larger database. And last is ITree Design, which is a tool designed to literally help you plant where the best place to plant a tree could be. In this particular scenario you're looking at on the screen, the one on the left is designed to save energy in the summer, so we're planting in that green area. The one on the right is designed to save energy in the winter. So thank you so much for your time and attention in looking at these tools. And again, I encourage you to check out itreetools.org. But now it's really time to hear from the folks that are working to get this done on the ground and who are doing wonderful things to reach out to our public. First, I'd like to introduce the Heat Resilience Through Green Infrastructure presentation from the City of Philadelphia folks, including Erica Smith-Fitchman, Community Forestry Manager for the City of Philadelphia Parks and Recreation, Cheyenne Flores, Community Climate Resilience Specialist for the City of Philadelphia Office of Sustainability, and Maura Jarvis, Community Outreach Specialist for Public Affairs, City of Philadelphia Water Department. Take it away, folks.
Thank you, Eric. I think we're just getting our slides up. My name is Erica Smith-Fitchman. I am the Community Forestry Manager at the City of Philadelphia Parks and Recreation Department. I'm very excited to be here with my colleagues Cheyenne and Maura from the Office of Sustainability and the Water Department, respectively. And for some reason, our slides disappeared. There we go. All right. So no.
Okay, sorry, you can see them? Okay.
No, they disappeared again. There they are. Okay. So I am here to talk about how we are using heat data in Philadelphia to inform our urban forest strategy. So we're currently drafting a 10-year strategic plan for our urban forest called the Philly Tree Plan. And the goal is to create a plan for the planting and care of our urban forest, guided by values of environmental justice, community engagement, and sustainability. So here is a snapshot of Philadelphia showing the tree canopy as of 2018. As you can see, trees in Philadelphia are not spread equally across the city. As you just heard, environmental justice is one of the guiding values of the Philly Tree Plan. So this map helps to tell the story about historic policies like redlining, which Eric just mentioned, and their impact on our modern tree canopy. You can see the red and blue areas are the areas marked hazardous by the Homeowners Loan Corporation, and you can see how they line up to low tree canopy areas in the city. And in this next map, you can see the same redlining areas overlaid with the heat map of the city. So this shows the areas that are most vulnerable to heat in the city of Philadelphia. Some neighborhoods in Philadelphia can be up to 22 degrees hotter than surrounding areas. So when we started our urban forest strategic plan process, we knew that heat exposure and vulnerability were going to play a big part in our analysis. You can do the next slide. Thank you. So about a year ago, we launched our Philly Tree Plan effort, and we used heat along with many of the other variables you see on this slide to create a prioritization map to identify neighborhoods that are highest priority for increased tree planting and care. So we've used environmental variables like heat, which was weighted as it was given twice the weight of any other variable. But we used heat and tree canopy. We used indicators of air quality like traffic and industrial activity. We combined them with demographic factors like race and income, plus public health criteria. Here you can see asthma rates, cancer rates, and mental health indicators. So heat was the variable that was weighted the highest in the algorithm, and we used those variables to create this prioritization map. And this map has guided our outreach to the plan itself. And you'll see in the next few slides, we will also use it in the final plan recommendations. So here you can see part of our public outreach process to inform our strategic plan. We recruited residents from those priority areas in orange to act as neighborhood ambassadors. And this was a six-week paid program where these residents acted as ambassadors to the plan from their communities to ensure that the priorities of these communities are reflected in the final plan. These communities are the most vulnerable communities, and we wanted to make sure that we were reaching out specifically to them, those that are experiencing that high heat and other variables, to make sure that they had a voice in the process. On the next slide, you can see, again, we did a listening tour as part of our public outreach for the plan. We attended 32 meetings and spoke to over 850 participants. And you can see, again, we focused these meetings in the priority areas to make sure that those residents' concerns and dreams are reflected in the final plan. In addition to the ambassador program and the listening tour, we did a number of other public outreach methods, including a citywide survey. And we are extremely proud that 46% of the 7,000 responses we got to the citywide survey came from zip codes that contain those priority areas. So the priority areas will inform the final recommendations of the plan. And by the end of the year, we'll have a final strategic plan, which will highlight those areas and make recommendations for neighborhood-specific canopy goals and metrics, changes to existing policies, programming and management methods, and increased investment that's tailored to each of those priority areas. And this is one of the ways that we're using heat data to inform our strategy and policy making for our urban forest here in Philadelphia.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself. Erica, that was excellent. Okay, so I'm going to give a brief overview of a similar process from the Office of Sustainability. I am Cheyenne. I'm the Community Climate Resilience Specialist with them. We are working to, as a city, approach climate resilience through many lenses. But some of the work that I have the privilege of leading is through the lens of heat and energy equity that we found as major priorities through our process in Hunting Park, one of the hottest neighborhoods in the city. As Erica mentioned, some neighborhoods in Philadelphia can be 22 degrees hotter than others at a given time. And we know this is as a result of discriminatory practices such as redlining and many others, and is very connected to the fact that trees have been either taken down or not cared for in specific neighborhoods. And so it's related to greening, but it's also related to community resilience, community cohesion, and also access to necessary things that we all need to stay cool and also stay safe. So through the process of Beat the Heat, which started in 2018, the Office of Sustainability teamed up with other city agencies, including Mara from Parks and Rec and her whole department, and Erica from Parks and Rec, and Mara from the Water Department, who's speaking after me, to join forces with community members in Hunting Park to talk about extreme heat. So some of the things that we did were resource tables to talk about the topic, a heat survey, which we did 2 different years, asking questions around what do people need during the heat, what are their priorities around it, and what kind of access do they have to things like assistance programs. Other activities that we did included having heat ambassadors who worked on the project, who were paid community members to either distribute surveys, hand out information, and also we implemented recently something called neighbor checking, where we went out every Tuesday evening and checked on our neighbors together, handing out cool kits with information and also heat resilience resources such as mini fans, misters, electrolyte tablets, etc. And so this is a little bit of the blueprint of Beat the Heat, and we had some findings from the different series of surveys, and then also another project that we did that I'll speak on in a moment. So I'll share with you some of those findings as they relate to the heat reduction capacity of greening. So many people said, again, that hot weather is a very important issue to them. They mostly stay inside during hot weather. They need better access to fans and air conditioning, and in general, cooling options, right? We made sure to highlight trees as one of those. People also said they always sometimes feel too hot in their homes, but again, they stay inside when it's too hot. And people had a really high interest in cool roofing. They had a median interest in gardens and green space and trees. So people were invested in green space, trees, greening in general, but they had a lot of worries about it, right? And so the process that Erica just spoke on of this really in-depth engagement and connection with community around that topic was crucial to learn a little bit more about what was needed on that end. And then lastly, folks shared that they had like a low to medium knowledge of utility assistance programs that are available to them. And again, this helped us paint the picture of overall heat resilience as we know it right now in Philly and how to better inform that. This was over the course of 2 different years. And then I also want to talk a little bit about what we did with those findings for our Beat the Heat Hunting Park plan that was released in 2019. And again, we did another survey in 2020 after that, but these are some findings that we put into 3 categories. The first being home cooling, cooling in public spaces, and trees and greening. And you can see that on the right side. So there are a series of thoughts and ideas that we populated with community members and our partners on these different topics and how to improve them. But this is just the step in our plan. And it all gives rise to kind of the whole conversation we're having today with these 3 different departments and has informed all of the efforts that we're talking about right now. And then we also did another wonderful opportunity where we were able to connect with community members, and that was in our energy burden focus groups. So we held these over the course of about 3 months with 6 different community-based organizations, mostly grassroots organizations, who helped us connect with community members. We compensated both the community-based organizations and the participants, and each group had 3 different meetings on the topics of heat resiliency, gas use and preferences, and also weatherization and home retrofits. Overall, folks share with us that their monthly energy bills are too expensive for them to afford. They're mostly uncomfortable in their homes. Again, it's too hot or too cold. Folks needed better access, outreach, and support around energy assistance programming. Many people were extremely interested and highlighted home building repairs, the need for home building repairs, the interest in doing them themselves, and the interest in more programs that help them with that. So that included weatherization, but also included cooling strategies such as trees and cool roofing. Many people were interested in more greening, more treeing, but needed to see those initiatives paired with housing security initiatives and making sure that developers who are bringing in not only gentrification, but also taking away trees, that they are being held accountable for that and instead adding to the greenery and the community cohesion of a neighborhood. And then lastly, participants wanted to emphasize the need for addressing safety concerns around gas, specifically gas use, reducing utility bills. It's really rising here in Philly, in our city, and I know nationwide. Improving our health, so that is emphasizing the need to respond to climate change and air pollution, and making sure to put people in their communities to work, specifically around weatherization and home building repair strategies. And then lastly, and I'll use this to introduce Mara with the water department. We did do a wonderful study around the cooling capacity of GIS, green infrastructure, green stormwater infrastructure, GSI, I always do that, and how those things can help us actually respond to heat. So some of the kind of objectives of our project were to characterize that cooling capacity, to figure out, does it even have one? How far does it go? What's the experience of people on the ground? And so we use different indices, including a GI equity indice and the heat vulnerability index that Erica mentioned, to figure out where to choose that spot. We use low-cost devices to collect that information. And then we found that it does support the idea that GSI can cool an area in the immediate residential zone that we were testing, and that there is need for more deeper investigation on the topic with the preliminary findings. So we have secured a grant to finish that up, and we're working on that right now. And again, that is using the installations of GSI by the water department, part of their Green City Clean Waters program. And with that, I will hand it over to Mara. And Mara, you just let me know whenever you need me to change the slides.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for teeing us up. That was a great transition. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mara Jarvis. I'm presenting on behalf of the Philadelphia Water Department, and I'm going to give you an overview of our green stormwater infrastructure program in Philly, just what Cheyenne was mentioning, as well as a case study of how we've been able to implement some of these climate resilience and heat mitigation themes into our green infrastructure systems planning. So first, I just wanted to give some background about the Philadelphia Water Department. We were established in 1801. We have a very rich history as an integrated water utility, meaning our core services include the treatment and distribution of drinking water, treatment of wastewater, as well as stormwater management. And, you know, I work in public affairs on a public engagement team where our primary role is to conduct outreach around green infrastructure. So by now, you know, we've been talking about green infrastructure and how this can help with heat mitigation. And so I just want to highlight our specific program in Philly, which is called Green City Clean Waters. This is our public program. It's a 25-year plan to reduce combined sewer overflows. So I don't think that we've touched on this yet in the presentation, but essentially about 2/3 of the city of Philadelphia is served by what's called the combined sewer, meaning both wastewater and stormwater enter the same pipe underground. And due to a combination of development, which has resulted in an abundance of impervious surfaces, and our historic waterways in the city have been converted into combined sewers, you know, in the last 100 to 150 years. And so stormwater management here is a big challenge for us, as well as, you know, a number of other climate resilience issues such as flooding and heat mitigation, as we're discussing today. And as you can see here, we have a variety of green infrastructure tools and how we implement them, like rain gardens in public parks, depaving parking lots, and using the public right-of-way like sidewalks and traffic triangles to install stormwater planters, bump outs, and tree trenches, which are quite popular. Additionally, we've used GSI to revitalize vacant land, and we have stormwater regulations that impact private development as well. And so typically when planning, oh yeah, you can keep it on here. Typically when planning public GSI projects, the standard criteria are pretty technical, relating to drainage area or proximity to utility lines. But the reason why we chose as a city green infrastructure as opposed to traditional infrastructure to manage stormwater is because of those secondary benefits that GSI provides. So with green, you know, we can look to neighborhood plans drafted by our city's registered community organizations to inform our designs. We can create new spaces, new green spaces where only impervious was before. We're increasing access to environmental education opportunities, and also, the green jobs industry in Philly is booming. You can go to the next slide. And so that brings us to a very specific example of GSI where we were able to plan it in tandem with a larger collaborative effort to address heat mitigation in the Hunting Park neighborhood specifically. So you just heard from Cheyenne and the Office of Sustainability about the Beat the Heat pilot project, where we were a key partner in engaging residents in that process. And we wanted to address both the stormwater needs in this community. You know, we have an obligation to the Environmental Protection Agency to reduce those combined sewer overflows into our waterways by managing stormwater. But, you know, in addition to this sort of like regulatory obligation, we also wanted to address these concerns that the residents had in this neighborhood in a way that, you know, the water department can do. And so also, I did just want to call out a statistic that Erica had pointed out earlier, where, you know, there are some neighborhoods that experience heat much differently than others, and Hunting Park is one of those. On this graphic here, you can see that Hunting Park is, that we have quite a few neighborhoods like this, but Hunting Park specifically can experience temperatures up to 20 degrees higher than other neighborhoods. So it's quite a big difference. And you can go to the next slide. So here we're just zooming in on one piece of a large green infrastructure package in Hunting Park. And we're calling this package Hunting Park Cool Cover because not only is it managing stormwater, but the signature feature of this project is that we're providing new green space and tree canopy on the hottest blocks in the neighborhood. So as you can see in this rendering, we are implementing stormwater bump outs with some trees in addition to, we're putting in trees and bump outs, but in addition to this new green space, we have some really nice secondary benefits, which include increased pedestrian safety by shortening the crossing distance, improving the sidewalk, and updating the ADA accessible ramp there at the corner. And then additionally, the water department has quite a robust public engagement process, which involves environmental education at community meetings, taking feedback from residents on these systems, and even an opportunity for a mini grant through our Soak It Up adoption program. So we do offer small grants to community groups to assist in light maintenance and beautification of our systems. And, so it's just a really fantastic program all around where, usually we're not looking towards heat mitigation in our planning, but this is a really nice example of how we're able to sort of do both. So yeah, that's it for me. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mara. I think that's it for us overall.
Yeah, thank you all. That was outstanding. Very appreciated. And now I get the joy of introducing the Climate Safe Neighborhoods presentation of Pawtucket and Central Falls, Rhode Island by Leandro Castro, the project coordinator for Groundwork, Rhode Island, and Amelia Rose, the executive director of Groundwork, Rhode Island. I'm looking forward to this presentation too.
All right, just trying to show my screen here. Hold on one second.
No worries.
For some reason, it's not letting me choose just a window. Let me try. Nope. Okay. Is that, oh yeah, does that work? All right. Can people see it? Can someone confirm? Yeah. Thank you. So my name is Amelia Rose. I am the executive director of Groundwork, Rhode Island. And we are a small community-based organization based in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. We work in primarily 3 urban communities in the state, Providence, which is the capital, and Pawtucket and Central Falls, which are 2 very small cities that are north of Providence. And I'm just going to go through a few, talk a little bit about our programs, and then another staff person, Leandro Castro, is going to talk more specifically about a case study of similar to the city of Philadelphia, where we were working on heat mitigation in Pawtucket and Central Falls, and the community engagement process that we went through. So just an overview of Groundwork Rhode Island. We basically are a green jobs organization. We connect all of our hands-on projects with doing stewardship and urban greening with employment opportunities and job training. We have an adult job training program. We have a landscape program that hires people from the training program. We have a youth employment program in the summertime as well as around the year, academic year. We have a composting service called Harvest Cycle, which is a subscription-based service and we do the processing of the compost as well. And our catch-all category of healthy neighborhoods with other projects, including a lot of tree planting and green stormwater infrastructure. Just really quickly, our job training program, it offers a number of certifications, OSHA and other types of introductory courses to the environmental sector. These are some pictures of our ground core landscape crew in action, doing some depaving work, some park and landscape maintenance work, green stormwater infrastructure maintenance, as well as landscape construction. We've done a few green infrastructure projects. We love doing depaving. We were hired to do a depaving project of this parking lot in Providence in front of a new animal hospital. We've done a few rain gardens, one at the food bank, the Rhode Island Community Food Bank. A new project that we've been working on is these bioswale projects, which similar to what I saw a picture from the city of Philadelphia. These are low cost, low engineering input bioswales that we have designed ourselves. They're based on designs, we looked at Philadelphia, we looked at New York City and the city of New Haven in Connecticut, and worked with our Department of Public Works in Providence to create a design that is low cost and can be installed by our crew and without any need for specialized equipment. And so this is an example. It's gone through a number of different iterations, but it's for stormwater capture as well. It's great to hear the study that the Philadelphia did about the added benefits of heat and cooling reduction, or heat reduction and cooling of green infrastructure. I'd love to see more about that because again, we also focus on the stormwater capture issue, but realize that there's other community benefits to these types of installations. Just another piece of our job training program is around composting. This is just some pictures of our Green Team Youth Summer Program, which Leandro will talk a little bit more about. The Green Team is engaged in a number of, especially we do a lot of things around trees, tree planting, tree maintenance, tree watering. We've started doing some tree watering by bike for some of the street trees in Providence, and we've going to start with Pawtucket and Central Falls as well. That's a huge need, this kind of stewardship aspect, the long-term stewardship of any of these new green installations that we're trying to not only engage our paid landscape crew, but also our youth program. These are obviously urban heat island effect is a huge, one of the big frameworks for why we do the work that we're doing, the community greening work. And these are some maps of Providence showing the difference in surface temperature, with the red areas being obviously much hotter than some of the cooler areas, where you can also see the larger, the higher tree canopy in certain neighborhoods. And this also correlates with income and race and ethnicity, with higher income areas and communities that are with white people, more concentration, have more trees than communities of color and lower income communities. Moving on here, stormwater runoff. This is also something that we are prioritizing with all of our work. Environmental justice, recognizing the difference between communities of color and more affluent white communities, and the difference in environmental burdens and benefits. Some statistics about Providence, and it is similar for Pawtucket and Central Falls because they're right next door. We have a high rate of income inequality. The low income energy burden is very high, very polluted air quality, and high ozone days. So all of these things are informing the work that we do, including here are maps of asthma rates. This is a map here of Providence, and then here's Pawtucket and Central Falls. So you can kind of see it's right here in the center of the state, right on Narragansett Bay. Lead poisoning rates. I've obviously borrowed from a couple of different presentations to put together this one. So now I am going to stop my part of the presentation. That was just a broad overview of what Groundwork is and the framework for how we do our work. We're also part of a national network called Groundwork USA, which has affiliates all over the country. And we were part of a cohort the past couple of years that was funded by the Kresge Foundation as well as the JPB Foundation. And we also received funding from the Rhode Island Department of Health, the climate change program, to launch a program called Climate Safe Neighborhoods in Pawtucket and Central Falls. And I will turn it over to Leandro to continue this part of the presentation.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us. So when starting 3 years ago with the Climate Safe Neighborhoods project, one of the things that I noticed while studying these heat maps, these GIS maps, was that I lived in the center of an urban heat island. When looking at it, I lived in the center of in the blister of those heat maps. Also, our office is in the center. I went to school in one of them, and you know, got really caught up looking at the data itself, and really wanted to go out to the community and hear the stories of the people. Like, how is the effects of climate change, people at the forefront of these effects, how is it affecting them directly? And I thought about an audience of one. If I had an audience of one of a community member living in this area, how can I talk to them? How can I keep their attention of these thing that of these things that sometimes can seem like a really far away problem, but we're really actually living it and seeing the effects of it and affecting our lives. And I thought about my mother, Maria Tejada, who migrated here from the Dominican Republic in '94. Single mother in the middle of the city, 2 jobs, 2 kids. If I, as a community organizer, wanted to talk to her about lowering temperatures and increasing tree canopy, how can she not shut the door in my face? And I came up with 2. It was just something that had to do, something that I could keep her attention with, was the health of her children. Something that would affect her pockets. You know, she was, having 2 jobs, going to New York City on the weekends to sell jewelry. And this was the approach. I was like, okay, we need to, as a group, as a community, speak to these concerns. The next slide, please. This is just a quick example of a certain block in Central Falls on a regular day of 95 degrees, a poverty level up to 18.5, and impervious cover surface 85%. Next slide. And this is a white community in pretty affluent community in the east side of Providence, where you see the temperatures down by 5. In some areas of the city, you can see a contrast of about 10. Really shocking to hear the 22 difference in Philadelphia. And as you can see, the households and poverty level goes by 3, and just something that we don't believe. Not only the rich, the monetary rich, should be experiencing the benefits of green infrastructure. Next. So we did a survey. Instead of implementing something that we studied in our office, so we came up with, we wanted to put the pen in the hands of the community as far as our plan to speak to these concerns, and what we thought was our concerns and what was theirs. And here you can see lack of trees was the main one, limited access to healthy food, literally a food desert at times, lack of parks and open space, and flooding. And we wanted to, next slide, we wanted to speak to these concerns through our green team, which consists of a youth from 14 to 18 years old. From year, it can vary from 14 to 24 youth in the city. And we wanted to hear their stories, wanted to be informed about what spaces is it that they use. Is it this basketball court on the east side of Pawtucket? Where is it that just so that when we do build these green infrastructures, we have people to steward them that really care about them, that have stories connected to these spaces. Next slide. And we looked at, since our budget wasn't that big to start these projects, what was in place that we can use to distribute. And we noticed that there was a free tree planting program in Pawtucket, which nobody in the neighborhoods where we were knocking doors knew about. There was a free rain barrel program. But we wanted to speak to so we wanted to speak to these concerns as far as like the limited access to healthy food by building raised garden beds and placing them in people's backyards so people can grow their own food, installing rain barrels so that they can water their own garden and reduce their utility bills, and also reduce flooding. And on here on the left, you can see that it was something to get the youth online, and you look at this GIS maps, but it didn't feel as connected, as tangible. So we printed out really big maps after they have spent so much money on these GIS maps, we printed out maps, we put transparency covers on them and used erase markers. Like, where are the places that you use? Where are the places that you go around? And next slide. So we started with planting 4 trees that first year. And now we have planted over 150 trees, and 200 or more will come next year. And I would say, with 1 minute left, that the biggest thing that I see to access to these green projects, green programs that the city has, or even the ones that we offer, is the lack of access. Do we have it in the language that the community speaks? If you ever throw out a free tree planting program, the greenest areas are going to be the first to sign up, and the ones that will email you 1,000 times. So, like, what way is it that you can connect? Is it through an auntie? Is it through an uncle? Is it through the bodega that's right next to the school? So thinking about those and knowing that to connect with that neighborhood, but you have to get creative with the way you do your outreach to these communities if you really want to hit your target audience and target demographic, which we want to speak to. But yeah. And we did this through community education and the city council and elementary school and high schools. And now we're using a tree equity score analyzer, which takes into the criteria like low income, the heat vulnerabilities, and gives you outcomes of how you're reducing pollution, how you're reducing flooding. Next slide. And that's how we prioritize. Is it a high equity score who wants a tree? No. The lowest tree equity score are the ones we are prioritizing. And Amelia, you want to go over with this slide, the last one?
Oh, was I going to talk about something there?
Yes, I seen you put a note in there.
I think we're all set.
Okay.
I can't go backwards.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And thank you both very much. That was outstanding. I really appreciate it. So I've got questions building up here in the queue. We'll start with Cheyenne. Cheyenne, what devices do you use to collect remote data? Have you developed relationships with local researchers? Are you leveraging citizen science networks?
Yeah, so we were working with local researchers on the GIS heat collection analysis. And we will continue to do so. And we used these low-cost sensors that actually students with the local researchers at Jefferson University and Westchester University made. So they were very, very simplistic and did the job, but I think we kind of determined that further analysis will have to be probably with a little bit more detail in sensors that we use, and they were deployed about a foot off the ground under different installations of GSI, particularly tree trenches. And what was the last question?
Hold on here. Are you leveraging citizen science networks?
Yeah, you know, with that project, the goal was to have citizen science be a part of it, but we just completely ran out of time, and we also didn't have enough funding to adequately compensate residents for that job. We had another project that we did with neighborhood level roadside planters, benches, and umbrellas that we partnered with Drexel University on, and an institution called Esperanza in the Hunting Park neighborhood. And citizen scientists through Esperanza's school program that they have there were employed to go around and use similar sensors to gather that data. So that was an opportunity that we were able to leverage that, but I think we have more work to do on that end.
Excellent, thank you. This next question is for Leandro. Christine Carmichael, a social scientist, found in a study reluctance about tree planting in Detroit residents, and I've heard of this study too. What are the reasons in part were objections to trees? More importantly, lack of trust in local government on past community improvement programs. Any such dynamic in Rhode Island? Have you Are you overcome by local youth being is it overcome by local youth being active in the community?
I would say reluctancy to trees which was one thing that happened in my house. A tree, a tree branch fell over our car. We had to fix the whole roof. So people are so making sure that we have foresters and arborists in our team to make sure that we can inform them in a way that those concerns could go down is like, as far as even the roots, is it going to tear up my concrete, and we try to find a solution so that they can feel comfortable with the tree that they're planting. That's the main one. Pollen is another one, like people that are hardly allergic to pollen, or the misconception of like, is it going to affect the asthma of my kids? And even we have one case right now with this community member named Maria, where we actually try to find her like a male species tree that doesn't really release as much pollen. And yeah, we've had a long conversation just to build that trust with her. And what was the last question?
Did you find that the local youth in the community were overcoming those challenges?
They were. I feel like they were just really active in advocating for places that they really use. Like, I really use this basketball court. I really want this exact place. So this is where we go pick up food, and in the times of COVID, really advocating for places that they use. So yeah, in that way they have been.
Thank you. This question is for Maura. Maura, how do you source the funding for the mini grants? And how many of those grants have you given out?
Let's see. So I will say I am not the program manager, but I can answer the question. So we work with PIDC. We work with a local sort of like funding grant institution to help with the grants, because as everyone can imagine, it's quite difficult to, do funding through the city. But we do have a partner in creating those mini grants, and I would say in any given year we have between 10 and 20 adoption partners, and they could be, working with, anywhere between 1 and 5 actual green infrastructure projects, so it could be a number of systems that they're working on. And obviously the amount of the grant will increase depending on how much responsibility they're taking with the systems. But I do just want to also supplement that by saying we're not depending on community members to do all of the maintenance for our systems. We do have a very robust maintenance team within the water department that handles, like the technical maintenance of systems to make sure that they're functioning properly and everything like that. But, there's really nothing better than having community members or stakeholders that live in that neighborhood and walk past the systems every day, to be able to take notes to say, okay, we get this much debris every week. They're calculating how much trash they take out of the systems. They're, monitoring them and letting us know if the system is ponding for longer than it's supposed to, and that sort of thing. So it's really just having an extra set of eyes basically on the system, and allowing them to educate their neighbors about it as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Here's one. I'm going to probably ask this to both Philadelphia and Rhode Island, the Pawtucket Central Falls folks. Has there been outreach to CRAs or business improvement districts for support for these programs? And I'll ask Erica first.
I'm not sure what a CRA is, but I know what a bid is. So, we are including as many stakeholders as possible in our work, and we at the Parks Department are working closely with the Commerce Department, who has those very close relationships to the businesses, to identify projects on commercial corridors where we can be planting more trees. We found in this huge outreach that we did across the city, specific neighborhoods have an appetite for trees in different places. And so, you know, to Leandro's point, some people are not comfortable with having a street tree in front of their house. They're afraid of it. And then those neighborhoods sometimes also have these huge commercial corridor areas that have a lot of space for trees. So there are different tactics that we are exploring for adding trees into neighborhoods according to what that neighborhood wants and where the space is to plant the trees, and commercial corridors and working with businesses and is a huge piece of that, but one piece of the entire puzzle.
Thank you, Erica. And now I'll turn it over to ask Amelia and Leandro the same question. And CRAs was clarified as being community redevelopment areas. So Amelia and Leandro, do you also have an answer to that question as well?
Sure, I can start and Leandro can fill in. I know he's done a lot with this, commercial properties. Groundwork Rhode Island does do specific outreach to commercial properties. We have a sister organization called the Providence Neighborhood Planting Program that does all the street tree planting in Providence. They're a matching organization with the city of Providence, where the city provides 50% of the funding and PNPP's endowment through private funding provides the other 50% to do street trees. And those are primarily for homes and homeowners and tenants who will steward the trees in front of their property. And so a big gaping hole is commercial properties that won't necessarily do that stewardship. And you can't, I mean, sometimes they do, but sometimes they won't. And so Groundwork works a lot with PNPP to specifically do that outreach to commercial properties and business owners, or just sort of like commercial strips that that need lots of street trees, like Erica was talking about, where there probably won't be stewardship from the actual business or property owner. And Groundworks, our landscape crew, Ground Corps, can do the stewardship. So we look for grant funding basically at this point is all we can do. We don't have any public funding to do that or regular funding. So we'll find grants and we'll be able to do that sort of outreach to commercial properties. We do have a new project, a grant that's funded through the EPA that is focused on green stormwater infrastructure outreach to commercial property owners as well. So that's focused specifically on commercial properties that already have green infrastructure or that could have green infrastructure, and we're going to try to troubleshoot with them to train them around maintenance and encourage the use of green infrastructure instead of doing kind of gray infrastructure interventions.
Wonderful. Thank you.
One example of that for us has been, we started this program called Green Schoolyard. So we were working on our first school, planting like about 15 trees. And for our break, we would go get ice cream at this bodega around the corner. And as we noticed the youth going to the school and parents walking to the school, it was an area that was a high pedestrian traffic. And we were going into that bodega. The bodega owner said, you know, who are these people with the green shirts? We're looking to add more green infrastructure to our plaza. And we planted there, took a big strip and planted about 10 to 12 trees, and he has been maintaining those trees. We are in constant contact, like, hey, today's gonna be really hot, can you please water? Another one, when we started at another school, we looked at around the businesses that were around, and there was a travel agency who we knocked on their door and say, hey, there's a school nearby, we're looking to green it, and we pitched why the school needed the trees, and they helped us fund, and we recently planted 12 trees there. And they were really interested too in having their staff water the trees just to get them off, you know, it was like a customer service type of center to get them off their chairs and get them moving too. That was a big insight for them. But yeah, we're always looking for those opportunities, those businesses right next to the areas that we're really interested in greening.
Excellent, thank you. It looks like we've run out of time, Morgan. Do I have time to ask one more question, or do we want to?
No, unfortunately, we have reached the end of our hour. But thank you so much to everyone. We can address any questions offline if you asked anything during the chat that we didn't get to answer. So as we end our 5th webinar, we would like to invite everyone to join us on October 12th at 3:45 p.m. Eastern for the next webinar in the series. We are continuing our Investigate Options theme, and we'll be examining community engagement, outreach, and education. Make sure to tune in for an insightful discussion with 3 municipal managers who are engaging in collaborative approaches to urban heat planning and identifying ways that may be helpful for your climate outreach efforts. And with that, we want to thank everyone who attended today's webinar, and a special thanks to our amazing speakers and everyone who worked behind the scenes to make this webinar possible. We look forward to seeing everyone again on the 12th.